Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Books. This being a show, it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I love the little, title card intro and everything, like the 70s aesthetic, because I was under the impression, I was like, oh, are they in the 80s? It's like, no, they're in the 70s, but I just love it, and it's just kind of like, starring Clark Gregg, Ming-Na Wen, and kind of goes to the cast. I was like, that's super dope. I love it. And just kind of doing like your typical intro to something. It's just like, especially because getting like Jeff Ward to turn towards the camera, almost looking like giving kind of the smile and almost the nod. It's just, I love it all. It was so good. I love it. Nevertheless, obviously the team having to get, quickly adjusted, dressing up obviously fitting the decade and everything. And it's like, all right, Daniel's in there and they're like, okay, so he's getting dressed and everything. Coulson is asking Daisy how he's handling all this. And she's like, honestly, better than I thought he would. Cause he's not profusely vomiting with everything that's going down, but he comes out still wearing the same thing. And he's just kind of like, what? No. He's like, why do you guys wear stuff like this? But because he's still under the impression that this is the time they're from. It's like, oh no, this isn't our present. We're from even further in the future. So, but they're kind of Daisy's like, well, there's kind of squares in every decade. So it's like, you'll be fine. So, and also love Daniel bringing up that good old time travel thing of so the fact of the matter is, maybe you always saved me. Maybe I never ever really died. Because he's like, how do you know that I died? It's like, it's in the history books. It's like, yeah, sure. But who's to say you didn't pluck me out in time? Maybe this is always I'm never dead. Maybe that's how this whole thing works. And then it's just kind of, and Daisy's like, just stop thinking about it. It's just going to hurt your brain. I'm like, I love that. Because I think that's the go-to thing when it's like, but time travel, don't think about it. It hurts your head. But don't think about it. It hurts your head. Which is also interesting considering the fact is there's time travel in Endgame. So it's just very, very neat because it's just there's time travel in that. There's time travel in this. Obviously very different things on time travel. Because he was also suggesting the fact is if they get back to their present time, won't it be a different timeline entirely? Which is that's a whole thing in itself, so which begs, a great question because the rules on how this time travel work hasn't really 100% been set in stone. So how the ins and outs of it works essentially, Then they had the plans of they want to meet up with Enoch, so they go to obviously the bar he was, the little secret, S.H.I.E.L.D. place. And it's interesting because I was like, oh, he's probably not going to be happy because even Daisy's like, oh yeah, we have left him here for 40 years. So it's like, oh yeah, that's not good. So, but when they go there, the place is actually lively. Turns out there's no Enoch. Part of me was like, okay. And then they end up finding out apparently he left a year ago. So I'm like, I guess that kind of ties into well, obviously they find out wait, Freddy's still alive. He's supposed to have died 3 years prior because they're in 73. So it's he was supposed to die in 1970, but he's still alive. And it's wait, how is that possible? And then we also run into his sons. Was it Nathaniel and Gideon? Which is oh, that was a real awkward situation for Daisy when it's oh, ooh, Gideon's right in front of you. That's the biggest ugh. So she's just haha, and he's basically kind of hitting on her, which has got to make you feel really weird. Luckily, Daniel showed up and was like, oh, honey, yeah, this is my fiance. So on and so forth. It's that's super complicated. And obviously, it's the whole thing of now he's integrated himself super, super hard into S.H.I.E.L.D. to the point they're doing this new project called Insight. But now it's that means their projects are 40 years in advance. Because it wasn't supposed to come out to obviously more until more of their time is when obviously this whole thing Hydra had planned was enacted, and now it's it's happening this soon, so they have to try and find a way to stop it. Daisy and Daniel end up going into she hacks into the computer and everything, and it turns out some of their targets include they brought up Bruce Banner. I was like, hey, and he's like, who is that? It's he's just a kid, but he grows up and becomes Avenger. And Daniel's like, is that a good thing? It's yeah, it's a good thing. It's obviously a really good thing. So and once again, I think it's a sad yet interesting situation with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it's the only show that could probably make that correlation, that direct connection. Like, could they even say Bruce Banner? Because even the Netflix stuff kind of stayed away from, like, oh yeah, the green guy, the dude with the hammer, the dude with the shield. I mean, I think they've said Captain America's name and but it's just in the Netflix shows. But I think it was just always something they always stayed away from. This is only one of the few shows that can like heavily like wink and nod towards the movies, and I just thought that was kind of neat. They even said like, oh yeah, like obviously bringing up also Nick Fury. To be fair, Nick has a direct connection because he's actually been on the show like once or twice over the course of the series. But they also bring up Peggy as being other targets. Obviously, these are people who are crucial to S.H.I.E.L.D. as well as just, I mean, to be fair, like not just S.H.I.E.L.D. but just like the defense of this world. They play a big role in that. And obviously, it's interesting, this whole complicated situation, because especially for Daniel, it's like, it's a situation if he feels like every time he turns around, things are worse. Because it's like, maybe you should have left me in my timeline. Maybe I could have done something about it and made sure that Freddy didn't get to where he is. But then, Coulson's like, but who's to say things would have necessarily worked out the way, like, it's an unpredictable situation, especially with the Chromacons. Like, we don't know how that would have played out for you. Like, your story probably could have still played out the same. Once again, maybe this is the way your story was meant to play out because you were plucked from time originally. Maybe not. Who knows? Once again, how this whole, situation is going to get set in stone. But then it's the whole situation. And I thought it was kind of fascinating. The fact is that Freddy recognized Coulson. But remember, he didn't remember Deke. But I guess it's because he has the Chromacons there to kind of help keep him in. But it's just, I thought that was a fascinating line. It's like, you didn't remember Deke when you met him 20-ish years, a little less than 20 years ago, when you met him again 20 years ago, but now it's like you remember them now. I just thought that was kind of interesting. But they end up kind of holding Nathaniel hostage, and Freddy was like, no, I won't let that was my son, which is like, Hydra would be all about the whole, like, I guess I get it, because for one, it's like, well, your children are supposed to be your successors, so you want your kid around to kind of succeed, you want someone to pick up the mantle after you're gone. So I'm sure there's that legacy aspect of what, but also it's like, I think it's like, even though you're an evil person, you still care about your children. It's that aspect to it, which even Daniel was like, wait, we're taking hostages now, is there anything else you want to tell me? And then Daisy uses her power. And she's like, okay, that's a long conversation for another time. My question, and this is something I've been wondering about, the thing was always that Daisy needed her gloves, like her gauntlets, because they regulated the power to make sure she didn't, like, her quaking abilities didn't reverb against her and shatter her arms. Because she hasn't had them on this season, has she? Not that I'm aware of. I mean, she kind of has to. But I guess it's like, maybe, I mean, that was definitely more at the beginning when she couldn't control her powers. I guess, like, now she has much more ample control. Maybe they talked about that last season of changing that so she doesn't need. I don't remember. It's just like, not unless there's some tech or so. I feel like I just kept noticing that. I was like, she's not wearing her gauntlets, is she? Isn't she? Because wasn't that like, once again, because that was always the thing I thought was fascinating about her powers, is like she needed her gauntlets, because if she didn't, the reverb would break her arms every time, and to the point it would completely shatter her arms if she didn't, because that came up when she first got her abilities, Like I said, do remind me. Like I said, I'm an idiot. It's been a while, but like, do remind me if that's something they've changed and I'm just not remembering, because it's most likely that. Because I feel like even last season she was wearing her gauntlets quite a bit. I don't remember her really going without them, but like I said, my memory's terrible, so do remind me. But nevertheless, I love as they're making their escape. Lo and behold, who shows up? Enoch. Which initially my mind is like, are we going to find out that sadly Enoch is turned? Because I wouldn't be too surprised, because it's like, for him, he felt like he was all alone. And if the Chronocoms came to him and were like, be with us, like, these humans, they abandoned you. I mean, granted, because he still kind of considers them his friends. He still considered Fitz his best friend and everything. So I doubt he would do that, betraying the people that Fitz cares about and everything. So there's that. But the fact is, he wasn't there. He's been gone for about a year, must mean because, like, S.H.I.E.L.D. was kind of cracking down, and he was like, the other Chromacons are around, so I can't be around here because they'll eventually track me down and deal with me. So, or maybe they already got to him. Questions like that. But I think what I like too is that he does subtly, kind of like very passive aggressively, keeps bringing up the fact is, I mean, you did leave me here for 40 years. Like, he constantly brings that up. It's like he has every right to kind of bitch and complain about that. And you left him behind for 40 years. And like, we're sorry, but also sweet ride. He's like, thanks, and he takes off with the car. They take off, and so it's like, okay. So all that's going down, kind of rewinding a little bit. At the same time, Mac and Yo-Yo are at the lighthouse, and obviously it's not supposed to be anyone there because it was supposed to be shut down as a S.H.I.E.L.D. place in like '72. But then it's like, oh wait, like some people are still here. But I also love the fact is it was like a cute moment between Mac and Yo-Yo because it's like, oh yeah, this is almost kind of like a date. You know, we're going out, so it kind of counts as a date, and. She's like, yeah, I'm not even good at reconnaissance. He's like, yeah, you obviously you are. Like, you're still capable of doing what you're able to do so much with or without your powers. And she's like, so why do you still call me Yo-Yo? He's like, because you always bounce back. And I'm like, oh, look at you two being so damn cute. I'm glad that their relationship ended up getting repaired. I'm so glad, you know. But I know that was like last season and everything, but still, it just reminds me. I'm glad they're on better terms and they're kind of working their way back to, you know, kind of who they were, what they were before, even going even further, you know. But regardless, I love that it's like, oh, like dudes in a jumpsuit. And Mac was like, oh, I thought you looked pretty tight. And she was like, haven't you ever seen a James Bond movie? People running around in jumpsuits, not a good thing. And then lo and behold, they see them working on something. See, told you, not a good thing. At the same time, there's the whole conversation between Deke and Simmons, and I thought that was really interesting because he was like, "Oh, Bobo," and he was like, you know, Grandpa or whatever. And it's like, "Oh, right, you know, I can't." All right. To protect, you know, we can't let the Chronocons. We can't know because then the Chronocons could get inside our heads and find out. Yada yada yada. So it's a whole interesting conversation, but obviously she's trying to like get back to work and stuff like that. He's like, no, I totally get it. But then like, cause she was acting a little different. And then like the moment he entered the room, she was just like, acting like nothing was wrong. And then she does the thing in the back of, like she rubs the back of her neck and we see like, there's like a bulge and then there's like 3 red lights. And I'm like, see, the season 6 finale kind of hinted to me, like at least it was kind of a feeling I got, like Simmons wasn't 100% herself. She did seem a little like robotic, not necessarily robotic, more like very like logical based. It seemed she was just kind of like, this is what's happening. It almost seemed like there was a little bit of a detach of emotion to a certain extent, but it seemed like it disappeared over the course of the season. I mean, over the course of the season so far, it seemed like it disappeared, but it just, I don't know, it just, her having access to the knowledge she has and everything, it just makes you wonder, like, so now I'm thinking, like, did they make her a little bit Chromaconish herself to make up for the fact that they needed, like, to combine her and Fitz's intellect, so maybe Fitz is like that as well? Or maybe that has something to do, I mean, maybe that has something to do with why Fitz isn't around. Like, obviously he's supposed to be doing his own thing, but maybe it had something else to do with it. Maybe actually Fitz and her, like, that part of me was thinking, like, what if they downloaded Fitz's mind into, like, no, because the whole point is them being separated. I just think it's interesting because we're slightly approaching the halfway point and we still haven't seen anything with Fitz. I thought that was just kind of interesting. So that's what just kind of kept crossing my mind. So I'm like, I'm curious to find out what that is, but I think it is they're making her a little bit more robot-ish. At least there's some implants that kind of help, I guess, maybe like boost her, like, because it seems like, because she talks about it later on, like she's supposed to know certain things, and it's like, I guess the kind of like, because she's like, I'm supposed to know when we're jumping, like, but she was kind of caught off guard, so it's like, she's like, I'm forgetting stuff, because even the fact is, like, oh, when Deke was like, Bobo, she was almost like, who? It's like, oh, right, Fitz. Why am I not remembering that, you know? So it's a little stuff like that makes you wonder, like, what that is, and she's like, I guess, like, I'm wondering, what is that, like, is it because of maybe her human body is finally rejecting it after all this time, or maybe because Enoch wasn't there to keep an eye on it? I mean, it's probably like a prototype type of thing. It's probably not like 100% guaranteed. It's just kind of a thing of like, well, we need to save humanity, so we kind of have to, like, jack whatever this is into you, you know. It might not be 100% fully tested type of thing. It might still be, like I said, a prototype stuff. Whatever the case may be, that's kind of a big thing to kind of pull from this. And also, Daniel kind of being super, you know, upset with everything, because for him, it's like, he'd even said it before, like, you know, he wishes he kind of was able to stay behind, because it's just like later on when he's with Daisy and all this like technology is kind of getting thrown at him, and just like, wow, so much I missed. And she's like, yeah, sorry about all this. He's like, yeah, I just, you know, wish there were certain goodbyes I wish I could have, because I'm sure one of those goodbyes would have been to Peggy. Granted, once again, I've not seen season 2 yet. I haven't even started season 2 yet. Just other stuff on my plate. but I'm assuming where things kind of ended off for them, like, that's one of the people he probably would have wanted to say goodbye to. I mean, considering the fact is when Gemma was pretending to be Peggy, like, he was very excited to run into her because he probably hadn't seen her in a while at that time, in the 50s. But regardless of all of that. Also, there's that situation, well, getting back to it, like, Daniel's pissed because it's almost like we're always one step behind, because it's like you're supposed to know all this stuff. Like, the fact of the matter is the chronocoms ended up jumping 3 years in the future. You didn't see that coming, because that's the downside of like jumping when they jump. But it's like, I guess for Gemma, it's a thing of like, once again, she should have known, like when they're jumping, she should have felt it or known ahead of time, or maybe there's something predictive in her that lets her know, like maybe she has access to like all their information so that when they jump, she knows, because it's like, okay, I know from future records that now are being downloaded to me that they jumped at this point in time, jumped to this year, so she always knows like where they're going next. But so she was kind of completely caught off guard when they do that 3-year jump. I don't know. I'm like I said, I'm curious about it. And obviously he was kind of getting very heated towards Gemma, because it's like, you're supposed to know this, you don't understand it, I want answers. And Deke had to be like, back off, because he's like, I'm kind of out of, basically he's like, I left my time behind. And then Deke's like, you're not the only one, because he doesn't know, like, oh yeah, Deke's not from even the time they're from, he's from even further in the future. He's from a future that, I mean, technically speaking, probably technically doesn't exist anymore and everything. Well, not technically, well, straight up doesn't exist anymore, right? Or is it like rather because there's a new future timeline that got created when all the changes were made? So regardless, I also didn't talk about that, but I love we get Patrick Warburton in the episode too. Because for a second I forgot. I was like, right, you're part of S.H.I.E.L.D. and everything, because we know you present day, because you're just like a hologram that kind of comes up from time to time. I was like, right. So, and it's weird seeing him with the mustache and everything. I was like, Patrick freaking Warburton, dude, that's so awesome. I adore Patrick Warburton, dude. Just like, especially obviously his voice acting work from Venture Brothers as Brock to Joe on Family Guy, so on and so forth. God, I completely forgot about that scene between him and May, and I love that, where it's like May's like kind of like, oh, would you buy me a drink? He's like, it would be very inappropriate HR-wise for me to give you a drink. I could give you assistance from someone. And she's like, oh, I'm actually from HR, and that was actually really good. He's like, yeah, I've been to a few seminars. And part of me was like, were you doing that just because you're like, oh, I want to be more knowledgeable? Or is it like, oh, you got in trouble HR-wise, so you had to go to seminars? It seems like it's more so the latter than the former, especially the way he kind of talked about it. But later on, I love when May and Coulson run into him, because he's like, okay, you're not going to believe us, but obviously Hydra's been infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. The fact of the matter is they're working with these aliens. It's like, oh, like the organic or inorganic time. He's like, oh, well, kind of a little bit of both. And then May touches him and then punches him. He's like, whoa, I was getting through to him. And she's like, he didn't feel the same way. My immediate thought was, I thought we were going to find out that he's actually a chronocom. Like, I thought that's what it was going to end up being, because like she'd be able to touch him and realize, because much like when she touches Coulson, she doesn't feel any emotions from him. I thought the same thing was going to happen there. But, I guess it's just like, no, she was able to read him, which obviously that whole empath thing is kind of coming in super handy. It's actually kind of sad, too, because there's that moment between Coulson and May, because he's like, oh, us wearing these suits and everything kind of makes it feel like the old days and stuff like that. He's like, dude, makes you wonder, will things ever kind of go back to the way they were, like, or rather go back to feeling the way they were? And May's like, I wonder, will I ever go back to feeling anything at all, so... But nevertheless, the initial plan was like, hey, we're going to like flood the lighthouse to kind of get everyone out of there and kind of mess up their launch of the Insight. And, they were going to try and like set some stuff up so they could get everyone out, because like there's no telling who's Hydra, who's actual S.H.I.E.L.D, and if there's any prisoners there. Like this way they could make sure that everyone kind of ended up getting funneled out before they flooded the place. Obviously that's where like Daisy and Daniel were kind of like opening doors and stuff for them. At the same time, Deke and Yo-Yo are supposed to go pick up Malik, which that's a complicated thing for Deke, because it's the whole thing of like, he blames himself, because it's like, because I didn't kill Freddy when I had the chance. Not only was he around in the 50s, obviously, he's now been around even longer than he was supposed to be. Like, because I left him alive, he was in a position for the Chronocoms to come to him and put him in this position, and things are worse off. Now, like, Hydra's years in advance because of me, he blames himself, so... So he kind of wants to make up for that, because even, Gemma tried to make him feel better, being like, no, like, you did what the decision you felt was right at that time. But he's like, yeah, but now I'm putting the world in a position where thousands could die because of me. So there's that. Him and Yo-Yo actually go to Malik, not Malik, Malik, for Freddy. And I thought it was interesting because obviously they're like, well, what do you want to do us to do? It's like, bring him here. It's like, we can't just hold him forever, and he's like, I know, but we have to wait to decide what we're going to do about it. And so they show up, but obviously Malik's like, I keep calling him just by itself, saying, but Freddy's like, the fact of the matter is you don't realize what you're up against. The Chromacons already know everything that you're going to do. Like, basically, you don't see the bigger game that's at play here. You're always, just when you think you're kind of like catching up, it's like, no, the Chronocons are 10 steps ahead, because we see that because Daniel and Daisy ended up getting captured by Nathaniel, because I guess that was in his way, because we saw that he saw what Daisy was capable of, and I guess I was wondering like how that was going to circle back around. Well, we find out at the end of the episode he's trying to get a message to Whitehall, which is almost not even ironic, because let's not forget Whitehall did what he did to her mom. So like him being like, oh, I'm gonna dissect her to transfer her powers, it's like Whitehall literally did the same thing to her mom. So for you to do that, it's just not ironic. It's just very. It's interesting, like for that, Regardless, I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing. But so he's planning on trying to take her powers and give them to himself. But when the time came, like Deke pulled the trigger and killed Malik, and even Yo-Yo was like, what are you doing? He's like, yeah, breaking, we're no longer doing the status quo, or rather returning to the status quo, because he's supposed to be dead right now anyway. And obviously there's an envelope the Chronocoms had given him earlier, and it's like, well, what's in it? Because I was like, it had to be pictures of someone significant to the others. I was curious like how that whole thing, what the significance was going to be, and it turns out the pictures were of Mac's mom and dad, because they're held inside of the S.H.I.E.L.D. cells, and it's like, if we flood this place right now, they'll die. Which Jim was like, it's I know it's your parents, but it's insight. But even then, he was like, abort the mission, just because it's like he couldn't do it, because regardless of anything, it's like, you're asking me to not only let my parents die, be responsible for them dying. It's like, I can't do that. So it's like, we got to find another way, because of also because of that, like obviously it put May and Coulson in a position to be captured. But to be fair, it's like, that's just because the Chromacons were already ready for them anyway, because they knew just how, it's the thing, because of Freddy willing to do whatever he could to save his save his son. It showed them the opportunity of like how basically it's like, oh, we adapt. So learning how like we now know what kind of strings to pull to control humans, and kind of basically what's necessary to break a human's heart to make them not, to basically make it so you're more likely to know exactly what moves for them to make, or moves they're not going to make. You get what I'm trying to say? So now they had no choice but to use the Zephyr, and luckily they were able to shoot down Insight before it got into the sky. But now the Zephyr's position has been exposed, and let's not forget the Zephyr is their time machine. So it's like, if the Zephyr ends up getting destroyed, they're stuck wherever they're at. Which even that's kind of a thing, because even Daniel was kind of suggesting like staying behind, because he didn't want to kind of be, because every time they jump further into the future, it's like things just seem like they get worse and worse, and he becomes more and more disconnected, and just like it just becomes that bigger of a gap between like everything he ended up having to leave behind, So like I said, just interesting. It's a parallel I didn't even think about. Like the fact that matters, it's not just everyone else out of time. You have two very specific out of time people. Daniel from the past, and obviously Deke from the future, a version of the future. An alternate future. So very interesting things. Ultimately, I'm curious to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode, especially this whole Deke thing, like him pulling the trigger. Like, I'm sure Mac's not going to be too happy about that. It's like, yeah, it's still kind of the thing of like, you're part of S.H.I.E.L.D. You killing someone like that is kind of frowned upon. It's not what they stand for doing that. So it's like, that's going to, but, in his mind, it's the thing of like, am I, am I doing the right thing by correcting the mistake I made, or am I making an even bigger mistake? Like, was that something they calculated that Deke would pull the trigger? I mean, because I think in the grand scheme of things, we actually think about it, he's kind of an anomaly himself, because of all this. I mean, I guess you could also make the argument that kind of puts Daniel in that same category as well as being a bit of an anomaly. So I'm curious, like, how that all is going to shape up going forward as well. So we'll see. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.